Israel and Hamas agreed on November 22nd to a hostage release deal that will see the first pause in fighting since October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel, and Israel responded with a siege and bombardment on the Gaza Strip. The deal includes a 4-day pause in fighting and the release of at least 50 Israeli women and children being held captive in Gaza. The deal also includes the release of 150 Palestinian women and teenagers from Israeli prisons, as well as ramping up the entry of humanitarian aid trucks. But the deal isn't a full ceasefire, instead just a pause in the fighting, a clear distinction Israel and Washington have made since the war began. More than 100 countries have called for a ceasefire to stop the steadily climbing death toll of civilians in Gaza and to allow desperately needed humanitarian aid to more freely pass into the Strip. But US and Israeli officials have rejected these calls.
A ceasefire now would simply leave Hamas in place, able to regroup and repeat what it did on October 7th.
Washington instead backs a shorter humanitarian pause.
The ceasefire implies some level of permanency, and a humanitarian pause is a pause. It's a pause for a variety of purposes. It can be about getting hostages out and humanitarian assistance into non-combatants. But after that's over, the conflict will continue. When you say pause, you have to ask, is it the entire force? Is it part of the force? Is it across the entire conflict zone, or is it in some areas?
The US rejecting a full ceasefire has been met with protests across the world. Israel has said it's open to tactical pauses, but said no to stopping its fighting outright unless all of the estimated 240 hostages are released. As Israel expands its military operation deeper into Gaza, the US has more and more begun to note its concern for civilian deaths.
As they continue to look at expanded military operations or ground operations in other ways, in other parts of Gaza, they need to ensure that they are safe, that there are humanitarian corridors for civilians, there's protection for civilians.
And we think that their operation should not go forward until those people, those additional civilians, have been accounted for in their military planning.
The restraints on Israeli conduct in the past 5 weeks have been mainly self-imposed. Not much from the outside, not much from Washington. Now, we have seen that changing in the past 10 days, where there was this push for pauses on a daily basis.
But as border crossings remain closed and Gazans still restricted from returning to the north, they now hunker down and can only brace for the fighting to return.